Welcome to Chapter 4, Emotions, Attitudes, and Ethics. In this chapter, we're going to go through the definition and importance of emotions in organizations, the ABC model of an attitude, how attitudes are formed, the sources and consequences of work attitudes, how characteristics of the source, target, and the message affect persuasion, an understanding of personal and organizational ethics, and the factors that affect ethical behavior. Let's jump in. Okay, so emotions are instinctive mental states resulting from one's circumstance or mood. And emotions are states or feelings as opposed to reasons and reasoning. Typically, they're directed at a specific person or object, and they're things like, fear, joy, anger, and they often are instinctive, right? They just happen automatically. It's not part of our rational brain or our cognition. It is our response to something that has happened. And sometimes has a physiological response, right? It might change your heart rate, dilate pupils, goosebumps. All of those are your body's way of responding to circumstances. They're short-lived, they don't last long, and they can be weak or they can be intense. They can be positive, they can be negative, and emotions often have the ability to affect your memory, right? If something is more emotional, it is more often that it will stick in terms of your memory. There's a number of universal emotions, right? Regardless of where you go in the world, we know that these emotions are expressed in a similar way, right? If you are in Canada, the States, China, Japan, anywhere in the world, if someone is laughing, you can see that they're happy. If they're crying, that you can see that they are sad. So these motions are universal and they're often powerful, right? Our emotions are a lot more powerful than our experiences that may affect you only on a cognitive level. Emotions kind of impact your entire body, so they do have at least the potential of staying with you long after the event is over. Okay, emotional labor and dissonance. The effect needed to manage one's emotions in order to perform effectively is called emotional labor. It is when something comes up and there's a whole bunch of feelings there on the left-hand side. When you are frustrated or disgusted or surprised or you're tired or sad or angry or scared. It is hard when you're in a work environment, when you are in a workplace or an organization, not to always show those things, right? Especially when they're very intense situations. But the acting side is we often need to be professional and calm, regardless of what is happening on the inside. And this is especially true for people in many demanding jobs like police officers, health practitioners, all those listen, even if you're working in retail and someone comes up and they're super frustrating, you need to be professional and put on kind of a happy face. What's going on. I'd be happy to help you, even though inside you're going crazy. And this is something called emotional dissonance, the difference between what is actually going on in your body and in your mind and how your exterior is presented. Okay, emotional intelligence is a little bit different than IQ. Everyone has heard of IQ, hopefully, and that is kind of your intellectual or cognitive ability. Emotional intelligence is arguably just as important or maybe more important, and it refers to your ability to recognize and label feelings, yours and others. How do you perceive emotions? How do you use emotions? How do you understand and manage them. And individuals with a high EQ can manage and adapt to a lot of different situations and very intense situations. So emotional intelligence is something also referred to as emotional quotient, EQ. And it has a major influence on your ability to work well in any type of employment situation or an organization. If you are completely brilliant, but you can't get along with other people and you can't really read their emotions, you're not going to go very far. But the opposite is also true. You may not be the most intelligent when it comes to writing exams and being book smart, but if you are emotionally intelligent, you have a very good chance of going far, both in your career and in organizations, because all of them are made up of people, and with people come all sorts of emotions that are not always easy to manage. And this is why managers often get paid the big bucks. Okay, here's the ABC model of an attitude. So an attitude is a set of emotions, beliefs, or behaviors that are expressed when we evaluate a person or an object with some degree of favor or disfavor, right? Like either you like it or you don't like it. And these attitudes, they can be formed directly as a result of your personal experience or an observation, or sometimes they're developed just because of your social norms, like the culture or society that you grew up in often shapes your attitudes. They can be explicit, meaning that you're aware of them and that they're deliberate and they influence your behavior, or they can be implicit. And an implicit emotion is where it might impact your behavior, but it is unconscious, meaning you are not aware of it. It affects you kind of below your level of awareness. Okay, so the ABC model. An individual does not have an attitude until they respond to a person, object, situation, or behavior. And here are the three components of the ABC model: affect, behavior, intentions, and cognition. So, affect is measured by the psychological indicators, verbal statement about a feeling. I don't like my boss, right? That's just the initial reaction. The next piece is the B, observed behavior, verbal statement about intentions. I want to transfer to another department. And then C is the attitude scales, verbal statement about this, about the beliefs. I believe my boss plays favorites at work. So, affect is the emotional component. The second component is your intention, the way you want to behave. And the third component of the attitude, cognition, describes the process of understanding the experience and really processing, okay, where is this person coming from and how may I act towards it? It's kind of like, what's your initial reaction? You go into a behavior statement and then you actually have an opportunity to sit back and process it, right? You go through a cognitive process. Okay, so how do attitudes form? So the formation of attitudes and behavior. So you either have a direct experience with something that strongly influences your behavior. So, you could have an experience that provokes a strong emotion, and that emotion will create an attitude or a behavior. And these are often powerful things, right? They're one-off things where you have a very powerful experience, and that changes the way you view a situation, right? Like maybe you have a very negative situation with a police officer or a fireman or some other person in a certain industry, and because of that, you develop a negative attitude towards that type of profession because you had a direct experience with someone who may not have treated you the way you want to be treated. So the second way is social learning, and that is family, peer groups, and the culture act to really shape your attitude directly. And children often adapt to the way that they are raised by their parents and their siblings. So this is called social learning. And so you have a direct plus indirect or social learning. Put those two together, and this is where you develop and attitude. And attitudes can be specific, relevant, timely, personality, or constraints. Those are all different types of attitudes. And after says that these 5 specific things affect the behavior. So you have the direct experience, you have the social learning, those develop the attitude. From the attitude, these 5 things affect how it's going to kind of move into a behavior, right? The first thing is how specific is it to the individual? The second one is it relevant to that individual? The timing of it, the shorter the time between the attitude and the measurement and the observed behavior, the stronger the relationship. For example, when a voter preference polls are taken close to election, they're more likely to be accurate. Personality is the next factor. A lot of behavior is dependent on your personality. And then social constraints, right? The effect of your relationship between the attitude. Social context plays a huge role. And that is like, when you're in Rome, you behave like Romans do. So the social kind of context you're in has a huge influence on your behavior as well. Okay, cognitive dissonance. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but individuals tend to behave according to their attitudes. You mean, like, as rational beings, we tend to behave based on our attitudes and our beliefs. But cognitive dissonance occurs when individuals behave in a way that's contrary to their beliefs, or when they hold 2 or more contradictory beliefs or values at the same time. And it also happens when you receive new information that is inconsistent with what you may believe. And so people deal with cognitive dissonance in a number of ways. One is they change their behavior. A second one is they try to justify their behavior. A third one is they change the attitude, or they ignore or deny that original belief. So you start with an original belief, you have some sort of dissonance that's introduced, and then you have one of the 4 outcomes. And it's not always a bad thing, cognitive dissonance. Like, sometimes it is a good thing because it shows that you are growing and learning as a human being. You may start in the organization with one value or one belief, but as you grow and learn, you may change, and you may develop a new attitude and a new belief, and that is perfectly fine. Work attitudes are very important because they either directly or indirectly affect your work behavior. Employee work attitudes correlate with performance, turnover, grievances, job satisfactions, and all of these attitudes are also related to are the customers that you're serving happy? Does the organization do well financially? And chief amongst these things are negative effects on employees and work attitudes. It's not good. It's not good for the individual, the organization, or the customer. And a positive climate change in an organization can often impact everyone's attitude. So job satisfaction is how pleasurable or positive you find the job. And if you have a very high level of job satisfaction, you are more likely to be a good organizational citizen. And an organizational citizen is someone who contributes to the organization kind of above and beyond what they really have to do, right? They go that extra mile. They join that committee. They work a little bit extra time because their interest goes far beyond the job, and they're passionate about the mission and the vision of the organization. And good organizational citizenship leads to organizational commitment. And that's when an individual really identifies with that organization and is committed. And it will stay long term and will kind of go through rough times with them and is just committed to that organization. The opposite is also true, right? If you're not satisfied with your job. You're going to do less, maybe not even do the basics, and then you're probably going to try to find a new job sooner than later. So attitudes in workplace are super important for all sorts of reasons, but mainly if you can have a positive climate in an organization and everyone is happy to be there, it's going to be better for the individual, the organization, and the customers that that organization serves. Okay, so attitude change in an organization. In any organizational setting, leaders will find themselves in situations where they have to change someone's attitude. And successful leaders must understand and be skilled in the art of persuasion. Sometimes persuasion has a negative connotation, but persuasion, it's kind of like a sales pitch, right? It's an opportunity to try to persuade somebody that there's another way to look at things, right? That you should look at things in maybe with a different lens. And changing workplace attitudes, again, it's good for expertise in the organization. It's good for the overall climate. And in order for someone to persuade another individual, normally they have to be an expert in the field, and most leaders are. They have to be trustworthy, and most leaders are trustworthy. And then the research also shows that you have a better chance of persuading people if you are attractive, and they for some reason have a better and maybe attractive goes way beyond just physical attraction. It could be people dressing professionally, people handling themselves in a way with confidence, and those types of things. People find that they're attracted to a magnetic type of leader. So when I say attractiveness, it doesn't necessarily mean physically attractive. These are source characteristics. Like, these are the things that are the variables of the source, right? Is it coming from an expert? Is it coming from someone who's trustworthy? And is it coming from an attractive source? The second variable in order to persuade someone is the target characteristics. And individuals differ widely in their susceptibility to persuasion. Depending on your intelligence, your self-esteem, your mood, sometimes your age, certain people are less likely to be persuaded than others. So not only is it important where is the source of this persuasion, but the second factor that's really important is what is the target. And everyone knows that in our society that we are susceptible to actors, musicians, athletes. Those are people that in our society tend to sway people's opinions based on who they are. And I guess a general rule is if someone is less intelligent and has a lower self-esteem, they're more likely to be persuaded. And if someone is older and is more intelligent, they're harder to persuade, right? This is why some people in organizations that have been around forever are less likely to be persuaded, whereas younger people who are new are often easier persuaded to get kind of on board. And then the last piece is the characteristics of the message, right? Is it a subtle message? Are people being encouraged to do it? Is it a top-down type of message where people are being demanded to do it? Are people saying, let's do this together, we'll do it as a team? Or are you saying, I'm the boss, you have to do it? This message characteristic, if people can understand why it's happening, they think it's important, and they feel like they're included in it, they're more likely to be persuaded. Okay, here is the cognitive routes to persuasion. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this model because, as you can see, it is very detailed. I would encourage you to take a closer look in your textbook about cognitive routes of persuasion. There is a lot of detail there, and we're just not going to jump into it at this point. Okay, and then here's the next piece: ethics, ethical behavior. acting in ways consistent with your personal, organizational, and societal values, right? This is what ethical behavior means. If you do what you say, you are an ethical person. And organizations with ethical reputations, they create goodwill in their community, and people like to do business with them, right? And ethical behavior can do a lot of things. It can create a positive workplace. It can help develop good employees. It can attract new applicants. Doing the right thing has a positive impact on individuals and the organization as a whole. There's a diagram below, but the most reported ethical lapses in 2017 by organizations. So you can see what people are most likely to lapse on, behavior and culture, and then least likely. And yeah, I just think that's an interesting chart to take a look at. Okay, factors affecting ethical behavior. There's two sets of factors that influence ethical behavior, and those are individual characteristics, people's value system, kind of their locus of control, who controls their action. Is it internal, or is it something that comes externally? And then the second one is organizational influences, right? Like, what are the things going on in an organization that will impact your behavior, right? If you have a top-down organization that tries to persuade you to do things that you may not agree with, maybe you do that because there's a stronger organizational influence that overrides maybe your determination to be in line with your ethics. Okay, and finally, the model of cognitive moral development. I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting into this. I do have a short video I might show at some point here talking about the different levels here, but just know that as you develop morally, you progress through these three stages. You start with a pre-mortal level, and in that stage, you often just follow the rules because those are what the rules are, and you feel like they are there for people's best interest. The conventional stage is the next stage, and that's when you line up to the expectations of others close to you and live up to the expectations of society. And most people stop there, right? They live by the ethics and morals of the people that they surround themselves by, and by the society they're in. And very few people get to that third level of being principled. And that third level is when you look at ethical behavior based on universal values, not just what you grew up in, right? And you act on those principles of justice and rights based on what you have selected, even though it may be going against the way you were raised or what broader society believes, right? And that is, a great place to be. This is the whistleblower, right? When we talked about last time about the whistleblowers, and maybe you get to the point where an organization agrees that this is the way something should be done, but you know that universally that it doesn't line up with the right thing. Okay, so like always, I would encourage you to dig a little bit deeper into the chapter and these theories. If you have any questions about Chapter 4, Emotions, Attitudes, and Ethics, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask.